Percentage of our mission budget now is going to short-term work, anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 years. A long-term mission is waning. Missionaries are not going out, they're not being paid like they were. A lot more money going to short-term. Now we could argue all day about the benefit or lack of benefit of that. But most of, here's the part I want to make sure you understand. Most of the short-term mission work today is not presenting the gospel truth. It's not evangelizing, it's not discipling. So what is it? Well, it's social things. It's digging wells in Africa, it's helping orphanages, it's building a school, it's helping poor people, it's medical. Are those things bad things? No, nowhere are those bad things. Should people in the church be involved in those? Certainly. Should the church organize such a trip on occasion? I don't have any big problem with that. If your church wants to do that, organize it and send it out. But here's what I have a problem with. If you're not presenting something of the truth of God, if you're not presenting the gospel, or discipling, or teaching the truth of God in some form, it is not a mission trip. It's a benevolence trip. It's a social trip. Just advertise it that way. Say, we're going to go together, we're going to go to Brazil this month and build up a school for these missionaries. We're not going to present the gospel, we're not going to do anything. But is it a good task? Do it. You know? People in Haiti got everything blown down. We're going to take a group of people over there and help build their homes. Is that a good thing? Do it. But that's a benevolence trip. It's not a gospel trip. Now, if we're going to combine the gospel with a social trip, great. But don't call it that unless it is. Don't lose our uniqueness. Don't lose the uniqueness of what God calls us to. What about the individual Christian? I'm going to stop there for just 1 second. That's mostly about the church in general. Any clarification, questions, or thoughts, or something that you want to throw out before I move on? Okay, you're all absolutely clear, right? Okay. The New Testament instructions for the individual believer. What should we be doing? What does the New Testament teach? Well, for the individual Christian, Jesus' general description of his role to his disciples would be salt and light. So in our world, we are to be salt and light in the world. But what does that mean? Let's look at Jesus' example. And this is important. Jesus healed people primarily as a sign of pointing to who he was. Now be very careful. As you read Christian books, I read this all the time. People say, well, look what Jesus did. Jesus healed the sick, he fed the hungry, he did this, that, and the other thing, and he did. Why did he do that? So please don't miss that. John 20:30, it was a sign of who he was. Jesus could have healed everybody in Judea. He didn't. Jesus could have healed the whole world. He didn't. Jesus could have fed every hungry person on the planet. He's God. He didn't. So why did he do what he did? John 20:30 says it very clearly. It was to show who he was. So that we would come to the gospel, come to the truth. So let's not make Jesus an example of what he's not. He gave these examples of what he did. Jesus showed personal compassion, yes, but he did not set up campaigns dealing with injustice, soup lines, orphanages, hospitals, anti-poverty programs. Are those things bad? I don't think so. I appreciate people who put themselves out for any of these issues. But Jesus didn't do it. So don't base your theology on what you think Jesus did do when he didn't do it. Jesus apparently had another agenda, a higher agenda. Okay? And that agenda was the gospel itself and his coming for us. When Jesus commissioned his disciples, he did not send them forth to heal the world's problems, but to make disciples and teach people to obey God. And so we think about the Great Commission. If we're going to teach his commandments in the Great Commission, what are they? What did they do? So people say all the time, matter of fact, Russell Moore, in going against the statement on social injustice in the gospel, said that we are to disciple people by teaching them to do the commandments of the Lord. That's what the Lord gave us. So what are those commandments as found in the New Testament? Well, let's take a quick look. There's two ways to find out what was the example, especially in the book of Acts, what did the church do, and what are the direct teachings. Let's take a look. Number one, What in the book of Acts happened? When the church came together, they did so, according to Acts chapter 2, to be instructed in the apostles' teachings, fellowship, the breaking of bread, and prayer, and they scattered to evangelize. That's a very simple model. I believe it's a perfect model for the local church. Now, each of our churches do things differently, right? There are different methods and whatnots. But basically, if we're a biblical church, we are doing these things. At least we ought to be. There's no example of early Christians attempting to transform or create culture. None. And when we think about that, we have to be honest. Paul lived in a world of the Roman dictatorship of Nero. Nero was an awful man. Sometimes we get upset about this president or that president or our Congress. Well, hopefully everybody's voted today. If I ask how many of you are really happy with our government right now, I don't think I get a lot of people with hands raised. We're disappointed. There's so much that's going wrong and shouldn't go wrong. We see that. But we're nowhere near what was going on in the first century. We really aren't. And yet we see no example of every Christian going out to change the laws of the land, to gain political power and so forth. Some people say, well, we're in a democracy. They weren't. That's true. We have rights they didn't have. At the same time, they didn't seem to be afraid of going out and giving the gospel and dying for that. So they could have done that if that's what God wanted them to do. They didn't. This isn't what God told them to do. So that's the Acts. When we turn to the epistles, the focus is toward establishing truth, combating error, correcting false living, and leading Christians into godliness. That's what we find the epistles. The epistles, of course, are the New Testament books written under the inspiration of the Spirit to tell us how to live in the church age. And we don't find these things there. So, society is seldom addressed in the Scriptures, but when, the New Testament Scriptures, when it is, the emphasis is on being an excellent representative of Christ in the world, salt and light, to be submissive to government, to be obedient to government unless it causes us to sin, to do good in the world. Christians are taught to care of their fellow Christians, the poor, handling their own legal differences, discipline their rebellious people. Now again, go back and look at the New Testament honestly. Take a quick look at the epistles and the book of Acts. You don't find Christians going out to solve all the poverty issues of people around them, the world around them. You do find the church vitally involved in helping the poor within the church, right? So just go back and look at that. When we start talking about the church being the instrument God uses to solve poverty in the world, where are we going to get our biblical teaching on that? That is not what happened in the New Testament at any place. It was always about the church, about God's people. Christians were told to treat their employees fairly, to be just. We are told in 1 John and James that to do good, and these could have implications of wider than the church, but in the context probably not. The church is the focus. So the church is a body of Christ that comes together to worship God, to receive the instruction of the Word, the Lord's Supper, and to be involved in the body life of the church. That is what God has called us to do. The church that is a church is never given the task to transform or create culture. Its sole biblical mandate to the world was to make disciples, call people out of the world to be disciples. Christians as individuals are to be salt and light in the world. The New Testament example and precept is to disciple people for Christ, which includes evangelism and training in the world. So what is the mission of the church? Is the mission of the church to address all the needs of all people, or is it more limited in scope? I suggest from New Testament teachings that we are to evangelize each people's needs and within the church, not transform society. You can rewrite that a little differently. So the Bible's clear. Take the gospel to the ends of the earth. Care for the needy in its midst. Historically, it's proven almost impossible for the church to keep the biblical mandate of the Great Commission in balance with the so-called cultural mandate. Every time historically the church has tried to add a second prong to the gospel, a social agenda, to the biblical gospel, the social gospel swallows up the biblical gospel and gets lost within a few generations. And I'm fearful it could happen again. The social gospel of the 1800s did that and turned the liberal church into basically a social agency. Same thing has happened in the 20th century and the 21st, happened in the 20th century as the liberal churches abandon the gospel to take up social causes. And a new wave is engulfing the 21st century evangelical church today. And we need to be very careful how we address that, and we have to start with the teachings of Scripture. Now, concerning our ministry on these things, this is our two websites that you can go to. Mainly, the top one, tottministries.org, is where you want to go for our articles. There's about 230 articles or so forth on contemporary theological issues that are challenging our churches today that you can see, including this one here on the social gospel. And there's about 750 book reviews of current books, mostly, that have been written. Some excellent books, some awful books, some in between, and there are book reviews on there for that, mostly written by me, but a few by others. And there's also curriculum on there for classes, Sunday school classes and teaching, including PowerPoints. And I think, don't we have some sermon stuff on there too, conferences?
Yeah, our men's conferences.
The men's conferences are there. And by the way, again, for those that weren't upstairs, we have a men's conference each year, which we're really trying to proclaim truth. It's called Truth for Every Man. And we have that in March.
15 and 16.
15 and 16. If anybody's interested, Edward can give you the details on that. We can send you our links to that. We have an excellent speaker come in. Richard Barkus this year used to be professor of homiletics at Masters. He's now the IFCA director. And we also have 8 different pastors who do workshops for us. I think you're doing one this year, right? So 7 great eight great teachers on these workshops on 4 different threads of stuff. I think you're on theology for us.
Yes.
So he's going to do. We have 2 breakouts for workshops for theology, and so Rob will be doing one of those for us this year. So we have a couple hundred guys come together, something like that, for Friday night and Saturday. It's an excellent time of fellowship, but also teaching. We're not finding that a lot of men's conferences are involved in teaching. They're doing all sorts of stuff, but not a lot of teaching. So this is our goal, our plan. The Lord seems to be blessing this, so we're looking forward to that this year. So if you're interested, feel free to come. For you 2 women over here, we have a ladies' conference this weekend. Going back there. But we do have a ladies' conference this weekend if you're interested. The speaker actually is from St. Louis. So, okay, got 3 minutes. Any questions, comments, eggs being thrown, anything like that? Yes?
I appreciate what you said about that there are social issues within our churches, and Christians in our churches find a home and help with those issues. I wonder if some of those are disguised from the church body. They think social justice issues are things outside of the church and not things we're engaged in. Maybe you just think about how sometimes benevolence ministries are in the corner over here and not the church meeting each other's needs, or just poverty within the churches is something we're embarrassed by.
Yeah, every church is going to be different depending on its setting, but the church should definitely actively be involved in taking care of its own, and the church should know about that. They should. Of course, that's sensitive. You can't say, well, we're going to give $1,000 to Sally over here, because that's not what we can't do that. But we know that we're helping one another, and when a need comes up, spread that need for people to maybe step up and give somebody a car or really help with them in some particular way. So we do a lot of that in different ways, and I think every church should be involved in that. What you meant, I thought you were going another direction I want to be clear on, as far as on the social issues today. I want to be very clear that some of these issues that are impacting our world and our churches are issues where we need to be very, very loving, kind, sensitive, and understanding. And one of the issues, one of the criticisms of this document put out on social injustice and the gospel, rightly or wrongly, is that it's dismissive of some of the issues. And whether they're right or wrong in what they say is not being challenged as much as it is. It seems like it minimizes the concerns that some people really have. And people come from different places, and those concerns need to be listened to. And we need to not dismiss too quickly people that might have a different view. And again, I shared this upstairs. I'll close with this for those that weren't there. I have a pastor friend, a black pastor friend in Cleveland. I spoke at his church twice. He's a pretty good size, 400 or 500 people in church. He's an excellent, excellent man of God. Good Bible teacher. I respect him highly. So I called him about these issues that are going on. I want to get his perspective, but I respect him. And his talk to me was very good. He said, look, I don't disagree with much that's in that document. But basically what I just said, when you minimize or dismiss the concerns of a lot of Christians, you don't help the cause. And you've got to be careful it doesn't come across that way. And then he led me, and this is something I close with for all of us. He said, we should look carefully in this as an application of 1 Corinthians 8. Remember 1 Corinthians 8? Let's not be a stumbling block to one another. It was in a different context. But he said, let's say we are right in what we're doing, but our Christian brother or sister is stumbling over us. So we don't have to take the high ground and say, I'm right, you're wrong. We can also recognize that they have some issues we need to deal with. And we need to talk about that. We need to lovingly show our compassion to one another on these things. And I really appreciated his thought. He says he's going to write something up for me, send it to me. I'm looking forward to using that. Because his perspective is not mine. It comes from a different world. Inner city black church, doing a great work. Very different than my background. And I hope he writes that up and gives it to you. But so I'll just leave you with that. It looks like right now we're drawing up battle lines that I lament, and I hope we don't go there. I hope we can have a calmer time, a better wisdom, and when it's all the dust is settled, we're the better people for it, and not more divisive than we are now. Okay?